Hello, and welcome to another ATA live stream. This is coming to you on Thursday evening, Thursday 8:30 Brian time, 8:30 p.m. Brian's time, 7:30 p.m. My time, the correct time. That hasn't been bastardized by the government already. So this is my name is John Humphreys. This, whichever side he's on, is Brian Marlow. We are with the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. We're going to be putting on a couple of regular live streams each week leading up to the election. If you were around on Monday evening, you would have seen our first politics live stream where we dissect the politics of the week. And on Thursdays, we're going to be doing a policy live stream where we very aware that politics is seemingly a policy-free area. We live in eternal optimism and hope that it might someday change. So we'll get into some policy details. But one more intro thing that I always forget to say, but should say. Well, firstly, this is live, so you'll see all our mistakes straight away. We can't get away from them. We can't edit them out. You'll notice, don't worry. The other thing is this is being simulcast on Facebook, on YouTube, and X. We have upgraded our systems now, so it's going to the ATA's system on all the Australian Taxpayers Alliance on Facebook, YouTube, and X. You can also find it on my own on a couple of those. And I believe we're also going live to the Good Source. So welcome if you're tuning in from the Good Source today. So please give it a like, give it a share. Show it around, feel free to write some comments, and also go to those actual places, the YouTube, the Facebook, the X, and give us all a like and a follow. It helps us to keep doing what we're doing. But that's a long enough intro from me. Brian, how you doing?
Good, mate. Good. I just want to cut some taxes for families for once. That's what I want to do.
Well, to avoid me talking all the time, can I throw you under the bus to do the pitch to try and beg and grovel for people to join and become members?
Yeah, sure. I mean, our organisation is completely donor-driven. Unlike a lot of other organisations out there, we don't receive any government grants or any taxpayer subsidies in order to then campaign for higher taxes. We're the only organisation trying to campaign for lowering your taxes, which means that no one wants to give us money unless it's some of our core supporters and donors that pitch in, and our entire organisation is run off these donations. So if you would like to donate to our organisation, you can go to our website. There's multiple options. You can make a one-off donation. You become a recurring member, which entitles you to a number of goodies as well. And that website's taxpayers.org.au.
Down there somewhere. All right. Having done the pitch, welcome everyone. Feel free to send in the comments. We can see the comments as they come in. And indeed, the policy night is feel free to try and stump us on policy issues. Feel free to ask tough questions. We obviously won't be prepared because we don't know you're going to write them. So, feel free to have a go. Already got a very good suggestion straight away. We'll get to this one, I promise. But Max Rawnsley, indexation of PIT, personal income tax. We're going to have a whole session. We'll have a policy live stream basically dedicated to that and a few other little things. It's not where today's at, but I totally agree with you. But yeah, we'll get to that one. But and there we go. That's the important comment for the day. But yes, we're going to start the policy series. We're going to have a. Sorry.
I wonder if it's the beard. I'm not sure. Maybe it's the sort of I've just woken up from a dad nap kind of look or something like that. That's
well, that's a nice segue. Dad nap, you say. So we've decided to start this series. There's going to be a whole series of these policy live streams about different tax ideas coming out from the ATA, because the government and opposition are like an idea-free zone. We thought we'd try to fill the gap. We welcome them to steal these ideas as we go. But the first idea we're going to talk about is family-related tax cuts. So yeah, it's a nice segue. You referring to the dad nap for your afternoon. Look, I know, Brian, you beat me over the head insisting this had to be where we started because I think it's a passion project of yours. Do you want to dive in about what your hot take on family tax issues?
I'm not the policy person and I'm not the tax expert. I sort of just try and set the maybe campaign and political direction of our organisation to advocate for certain things. And I've been pestering you for quite a while about what I jokingly refer to as Orban stuff. So I see what Orban is doing over in Hungary. I like what he's doing to try and incentivize families to make babies and to grow the nuclear family. Obviously, those policies can be improved upon and they can be taken one step further to actually encourage people to, raise a family and have more children and increase our population. These are things that we should all support. And I think that there are ways to do that through economic incentives that aren't handouts, that are through the beauty of actually cutting people's taxes and letting people keep more of their own money. So that's where you've come in and actually looked at these policies and tinkered around the edges. And the feedback we've had since we've rolled out our family tax cuts policy earlier this week has been nothing but positive. All of our support has been really quite happy with it. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I'll let you sort of dive into the details of it. But for me, the ATA, whilst it's a think tank that talks about taxation policy, I always like to borrow Tim's term, which it sounds a bit corny, but it's also a do tank, right? Which is like, okay, here's a tax policy. What can we actually do with it to try and drive change in the country to make the country better? It's not just about some marginal tax amendment for some spurious industry that wants to have a reduction on, I don't know, a brewer's fee or something like that. So I think there hasn't been enough work in this space and tax cuts that actually support families. I don't know why an allegedly conservative coalition opposition and prior to that government never really touched this. It's an indictment on modern day conservatives that they don't want to touch this, and I'm just glad that we're doing it.
So like they said, so-called conservative can be a bit tricky sometimes to know. All right, so let's dive into some of the details. Now, I should give everyone here a bit of a context. Those who've followed my work for a while would know that I can very easily jump straight to the radical end of policy suggestions. I enjoy radical ideas. They're a lot of fun. I think often the radical solutions are the correct ones, but it is fair to say that often they exist outside the Overton window. So I've given myself a potentially harder task here with these ATA policy proposals that we'll be releasing over the coming weeks. And that is to try and find ideas that aren't just correct, but are as the most correct you can get inside the Overton window, so that it's at least theoretically possible that a brave major party politician could do it. So I'm all for just abolishing income tax. No one's going to jump on that. So what can we do in the more realistic world? So keep that in mind. If you hear what I'm saying, you think it's not radical enough, I probably agree. But with those parameters, let's see what we can do.
But your policy assumes the government exists. How dare you?
Now, we put out the family tax, the ATA's family tax cuts policy to the media yesterday and out to our membership base today, I believe. So if you're not on our email list, then please make sure you go and get on the email list. And if you end up being a member, you'll get these early as well. You would have got them yesterday. But it released a 4-point plan. Now, the first part gives some context. I'll just say what it roughly is first, and then for that, so people who know the jargon will know what I'm talking about, and then I'll back up and unpack the jargon. So income splitting, family income splitting, that's basically the first part of what we're talking about here, but in a somewhat modified sense. So let me paint a picture to explain why this is something that's worth considering in the first place. Now, I'm going to use numbers, and without a whiteboard, it can go a bit fast, but I'm going to try to use as simple numbers as possible. So I'm going to use rounded numbers. So I'm going to use an example. In this example, there is a world with a 20% tax, a $20,000 tax-free threshold. That's close to Australia's tax-free threshold, right? So earn up to $20,000, you don't pay any tax. And then above that, just for the sake of easy maths, we're going to say there's a 20% tax above that, right? So $20,000 tax-free threshold, 20% tax above that. Now, if you are in a family with 2 working people and you're earning a total family income of $100,000, so I'll say that again, in a family with 2 working people, 2 working parents earning $100,000, you get to take advantage of the tax-free threshold twice, right? Because both people are earning. So say they're earning $50,000 each, they both get the tax-free threshold, and so it's basically a $40,000 tax-free threshold for that family. And then they pay the 20% on the other $60,000. So they pay $12,000 tax if you're following along the maths at home. So $40,000 tax-free, the tax-free threshold for that family, paying tax on the $60,000, what's above the $40,000. Now, if you take a family with the exact same family income, so 100,000. But just say they got that through one person working 2 jobs and overtime, and working so hard they're doing live streams at
Wife's staying at
8:30
home, the
p.m.
husband's doing the midnight oil. He's doing everything to put a roof over his family's head and do all the things.
Yeah, so or the other way around, I guess, for some people. But I mean, it's that way for you and I at the moment anyway. But look, just say they're working so hard, they're doing live streams at 8:30 p.m. That's how hard they're working night and day. But anyway, so they're also earning $100,000. That family unit. But they only get one tax-free threshold, right? So that family gets $20,000 tax-free, and they pay tax on the $80,000 above that. So you've got 2 families, potentially with the same number of kids, maybe in the same suburb, otherwise the same sort of situation, earning the exact same money, but one is paying, in that instance, $4,000 more tax. And they're paying that extra tax as a punishment for the indignity and the terrible crime they've committed, which is that the parents are spending a bit more time looking after their kids. And our current tax system
on the nuclear family, if you or on a traditional family.
Yeah, so it's a punishment on parents who want to spend more time with their kids, basically. It's yes. Which is a remarkable thing to say when you say it aloud. Of course, they never describe it like that, but it's not a neutral treatment here. All right, they're not just treating it neutrally, and we're saying, "Oh, come on, we just want a big handout." This is not a neutral treatment. 2 families in the same situation, they have to, if they're deciding how should we earn more money, just say they decide they need more money, how should we earn it? Should the dominant worker put in more overtime, or should the parent that's earning less money go out and get a job, or go out and get a full-time job? The tax system is not neutral between those 2 decisions. They punish the hell out of you if you have the main worker working harder, and the tax and welfare system basically rewards you if you take the parents and put them both in the workforce. So we've got a system that overwhelmingly rewards you if you outsource your children to a childcare factory, or get someone else to bring up your child. You will be rewarded in the tax system. So anyway, enough of that context, that background. So one of the suggestions, well, what do you do about this? Or one of the suggestions is you allow that family that has one parent earning most of the money to effectively split their income in 2 so that they can both take advantage of the tax-free threshold. That's why it's called income splitting. Now, that's how we often talk about it in Australia. Income splitting has been discussed before. I mean, Senator Matt Canavan's talked about it previously. In most other countries, it's actually, or in some other countries, it's described slightly differently. It's talked about joint filing of your tax return, so taxing a family unit. And here's another piece of context on this. Most developed Western countries, or just developed countries, don't have to be Western, tax the family unit, not the individual. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not a big fan of tax at all, but the relevant thing here is by taxing the family unit, they're able to then, their family unit gets a higher tax-free threshold. It's basically equivalent to income splitting. Right? And America has this, Germany has this, France has this, lots of countries have this. It's quite a normal thing around the world, allowing people to file jointly. So the suggestion, I've finally got to the first suggestion here. The suggestion is families, married parents, should have the option, not required, the option of filing their taxes jointly. And if they do so, their tax-free threshold should be $50,000. So that's the first idea here, right? This is the idea of getting these would be, these are parents, right? So we're not just saying you get married and you get it straight away. We're saying get married, have children, right? You build a family. And if you're building a family,
one-two step here.
And look, if you're building a family, we're all, I think, agree that it's struggle enough to be able to bring up a family on just one person at just earning $50,000.
Yes.
All right. So you're realistically already struggling. The national annual minimum wage is $47,000 a year. So the pitch here is this: for this family, they should at least not have to start paying tax as a family unit until they're earning at least over that $50,000. Which realistically, if they're paying tax at a income lower than that, then we know they are caught in, and they are, and this is part of our argument, they are caught in this tax welfare churn where this family is simultaneously each year paying tax to the government, for the government to hand it, from their left hand to their right hand, and then hand it back to the exact same family in the exact same year. Right. So this sort of pointless tax welfare churn is billions of dollars is spent on the tax welfare churn in this country every year. And obviously these families that are paying tax on income below $50,000 are caught, that all of that tax is basically coming back to them in another welfare payment later. How about we
So
just
what's
take
an
them out of
example
the
of that?
welfare system?
Like what they pay taxes to the government. What the government then pockets that, distributes it to other groups, and then also takes some of that money and gives it back to them in form of what, like a childcare subsidy or something like that, or
Yeah, well, firstly, families with children who aren't working can get New Start allowance up to an income of about $40,000 if they're earning $40,000. So you could be, if you're a family earning $30,000, you're still getting the dole. And you're getting the dole and you're paying tax on some of that money. And then we've got family tax benefit, which, by the way, I've just got to put a pin in this right now because we're talking about family tax cuts right here. Family tax benefit, the name sounds like it has to do with tax. It doesn't. It's a tricky name, like so many things in the government, right? They've worked out long ago. These bureaucratic bastards that are running our lives have worked out a long time ago that they can get away with a lot if they tweak the name of something. Family tax benefit has nothing to do with tax. It's just the name for the family welfare, right? And there might be a place for that. I mean, if people with no jobs are having kids, there's probably something that needs to be done for them. That's fine. But that's a family welfare program. So a lot of families are caught paying tax and then getting the money back either in New Start, like the dole, or in that family welfare, or in the childcare subsidy as well. So there's a whole series of ways they're getting it back at the same time they're paying it. Now, that sounds dumb enough. And probably the fact that, why would I give the government money? They hand it around in a circle and give it back to me. I probably don't have to convince people that that's a daft idea, but there's it's dumber than you think, right? So the problem with that is as these people are earning money, I say $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, they're paying tax, but at the same time, they're losing welfare. Now, of course, they should, right? You can't have people just earning more and more money and never lose welfare, right? Welfare is not for the rich, so of course they're losing welfare. But the fact that they're paying tax and losing welfare means that what we call the effective marginal tax rates are compounding, right? If they earn an extra dollar, they have to give, of that dollar, they have to give, say, 60 cents to the government or 30 cents, depending on how much the welfare they're losing. So they lose, say, 60 cents in welfare, but then they pay another 20 cents in tax. So they end up with an effective marginal tax rate much higher than what most people think it is, right? So we've got effective marginal tax rates well over 70, 80, 90%, in some cases over 100%. And just to, what does that mean, right? So this is abstract stuff. If the EMTR, right, the effective marginal tax rate is over 100%, that means if you earn $100, you have to give the government 110. Right? That's not a typo. I know I'm not typing right now, but I'm not misspeaking. We have situations, we have several. I think for some families, there are 5 different places on the income schedule where you have an EMTR over 100%, which means if you earn an extra $100, you go out, you work, you do extra work, you earn $100, the government takes 110 off you. I mean, you don't have to be Einstein to work out that. That's going to really screw with your incentives. I mean, it's a terrible set of incentives to put in front of someone. And then that person chooses not to do the overtime. They choose not to put in the extra work. And of course, some people say, oh, look how lazy they are. We've told them we're going to punish them. We are literally going to punish you for working. We're going to take your money away from you if you earn money, not just take a percentage, take all of it. And that happens in a series of different ways and places. But like, even below 100% EMTR, where the government takes all of your money, there are lots of situations where a family, especially like a low to middle income family, is paying a 90% effective marginal tax rates. If they earn $100, they get to keep 10. And again, that's atrocious incentives. I mean, imagine what else you could be doing with your time in the day. You could be volunteering, staying at home with your family, taking a black market job. There's anything else you could be doing with your time.
Becoming a financial member of the Australian Taxpayers Alliance.
Once you've earned your money, that's how you should spend it. But yeah, so you could be doing all those other options, or you could work your guts out, earn $100, and then keep only 10 of it. So anyway, I'm dramatizing, but I'm trying to make the point that this issue of this tax welfare churn, it's not just dumb and kind of laughable. Why would you pay tax and receive welfare at the same time? It is quite an insidious thing. And so anyway, this is go back, this first point we've got here, it's effectively allowing income splitting, but we're describing it a bit differently. We're saying a family, married parents get together, instead of each one of them having a tax-free threshold of it's about 22,000, right? I know you're told it's 18, everyone at home, but it's about 22. But put that aside. We'll talk about that another day. It's somewhere around 20. Instead of them each having a $20,000 tax-free threshold, they bundle together, put in one tax return and get a $50,000 tax-free threshold, trying to take that family as much as possible out of the tax system in the first place.
And then, yeah, and I think in terms of like real hard figures here, right, which is going off the numbers that you put together. So if a family enters into if a family receives a combined tax-free threshold of $50,000, they'll get an effective benefit of up to $6,500 per year, depending on certain circumstances. Now, for someone on a low income like that, that's huge. And a lot of the times, I hear a lot of people not wanting to raise a family and take that next step in life because they just feel like they can't afford it just yet, and they're just going to wait and they're going to do it a little bit longer. I'm 36. I've got a daughter and a son on the way, and I fell into that trap of I'm gonna have kids a little bit later. I just need to get a bit more money together. I'm not quite at the right level yet, and I wish that I hadn't fallen into that trap. I wish I'd had my kids 10 years ago when I had no money to my name. And when you have economic incentives like this, it can help with making those decisions, and it can help with people actually wanting to do that and raise a family, contribute to the country, and grow this nation. So I think it's a really important policy, and I'm glad that we're going down this path. And yeah, as I said, a lot of our supporters, when we fired it out earlier this week, were coming back saying this is awesome. We've been banging on about this privately for ages. Can't believe no one's running with it. And as I said, I cannot believe that the allegedly conservative opposition. What have we seen? Right, there's an election about to be called. They're basically in pre-election campaigning right now, and what are they talking about? Right, like who's going to outspend money on Medicare, or who's going to send more, white Christians to die in far-flung parts of Europe? It's insane to me.
It's been pretty empty. Like on all policy fronts, on all realistic policy fronts, it's been pretty empty, but especially so on tax, which is, of course, my bailiwick. But on your point there, we're both going to sound like such boomers now, telling the kids, go and get married, have kids. But it's actually my advice if anyone's at home.
It's actually
go
based.
Have kids. But and I agree. I mean, I've had
date hot chicks and do it. No, make babies. It's awesome.
So you and I have a similar story. We both got to it kind of late, and when we got to having kids, we both wish we'd done it much earlier. But can I just say that on the incentive front, because you're right, a lot of people saying they can't afford kids. Firstly, you just have to make sacrifices. But I agree. A lot of people don't want to make the sacrifices to have kids. But I think there's another side of that argument that is perhaps even more powerful. And this really isn't part of our policy. This is just me, being a preemptive boomer. But like the choice to have kids comes down to one of it is the cost of kids. But the other side of that is the benefit of kids. And it occurs to me that because I spend a lot of time with my kids, and my wife stays at home with the kids full time, we get a lot of benefit from our kids. I mean, we really do enjoy them. If I was to have kids and then I just sent them off to someone else to look after 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, and then at the end of that, I'm too exhausted to play with them on the weekend, I can understand why people would think, well, what benefit am I getting out of this? So I think there's a two-sided thing. People are saying, look, kids are too expensive. All right, yes, you have to make sacrifices if you have kids. But then they're also saying, and what benefit is it? I mean, I have a kid, I send them off, someone else brings them up. I guess they get to sleep in my house. I hear them cry sometimes.
Go to a childcare center, someone who doesn't really know what they're doing raises them for most of the day. They come back with a million flus and different illnesses 3 times a week because childcare centers are just little sort of plague incubators. And yeah, I don't get to enjoy it. And I understand that argument. I'm lucky enough in that, I get to spend a lot of time with my daughter. And yeah, I just, again, falling into boomer territory. It is awesome, and it is the best thing ever, and it is based, and everyone should make kids. Everyone.
Yeah, we are interrupting this tax discussion to give you a lecture on why you should all go out, get married, have kids.
Well, that's part of what this tax policy is there to incentivize. It's like we really should have called it like a tax cut for being based, because
here's the thing. Look, I'm very sympathetic with that, but what we're doing is actually even milder than that. We're trying to take away the incentive that currently exists in the opposite direction. Yes. Right. So what we're doing here, it isn't particularly trying to beat people over the head and say, make the correct decision that Brian and John have done belatedly, and you should. Currently, there's an incentive against that. I mean, our tax and welfare system is structured to explicitly bias people away from what we're talking about. We're saying, well, at least let's balance the system. At least let's make it a bit more neutral. And so that's what we're getting at. Now, there was a question that came in here, which segues really nicely into the second part. Wait, there we go. From Darcy, and of course, Darcy. Good to have you tuning in, Darcy. We should actually get you on here sometime. Come in and tell us what we've got wrong, and I'm sure you have a lot of good ideas as well. So the question here is, should the tax-free threshold increase per child? That is exactly part 2 of our proposal, right? So part 1, allow parents to pool their incomes and do a joint tax return with a baseline tax-free threshold of 50,000, and then increase that by 10,000 per child. So it would actually be 60 if you had 1 child, 70 if you had 2 child, 80 if you had 3 children, etc., right? So allow that tax-free threshold to get even higher. So look, the stereotypical example of a family with 2 children, postscript here, have more than 2 children, but if you had 2 children, say $70,000, and that would mean realistically people are still receiving the family welfare benefit, I should call it, up until well more than 70. Right, so people are still caught in the tax welfare churn at 50. So this would get you up to at least $70,000, 3 kids, $80,000, without getting caught in the tax system at all. Right, so that's the second part of the plan. And then the third part of the plan is going on a slightly different tangent now. As many people would know, childcare exists, and there's a childcare subsidy. The childcare subsidy is up to 95%, more often 90%, depending on your situation. And that childcare subsidy is available to nearly everyone. So what you'll notice about that is the childcare subsidy gives a bloody big subsidy, up to $30,000, $35,000 per year is the equivalent benefit you're getting from the childcare subsidy. But it gives it only to those people who choose to look after their children through professional institutional childcare management. So it's not just it's not a subsidy for raising children. It's a subsidy for raising children only specifically the way the bureaucrats approve. If you raise your kids the way the bureaucrats approve, which is pop them out, send them off to someone else looks after them, you pick them up at 6 p.m., put them in bed and go to sleep yourself. If you do that, you'll get a $35,000 a year subsidy for bringing up your kids the bureaucrat approved way. And you'll get a subsidy of 0 if you do it a different way. And look, another point that's been made about this is there are lots of people in Australia. I mean, majority live in the big cities, but there's lots who don't. There are plenty of people who don't live near accessible childcare. So what do those people get? Nothing, a donut, right? They get nothing. And then what about the people who have night jobs, shift jobs? You're working nights, there's no childcare centre at nights. So screw you don't get any. Right, so we've got a system now that's very specific. If you work in a very specific way and raise your kids in a very specific way, you get a bloody huge benefit, and every other way you get none. So we're saying let's mix that up. This isn't even about cutting or increasing spending. This wouldn't cut spending. We're saying instead, give every parent of kids under school age, because that's what childcare is for mostly, $1,000 a month. Right, $1,000 a month to be able to use on childcare however you like. So if you can use that $1,000 towards professional institutional childcare, we're not trying to ban it. We're trying to make things neutral here, not bias things towards our preference. So you can still use it that way, or you could use it another way. You could hire an au pair or a nanny. You could give the money to your parents, the kids' grandparents, so that they could go look after the kids and take them to Dreamworld, or whatever it is you're going to do. You can make your own childcare decisions. Now, the way we've framed that in this tax policy is a refundable tax credit. A refundable tax credit. So a tax credit, you take it off the amount of tax you pay, but it would be paid monthly. So that would effectively mean you wouldn't have to pay net tax. As a family of 2, you wouldn't have to pay net tax, Brian. I don't know if you have it in front of you. I don't have it in front of me. I think it's like $140,000 a year if you had 2 kids under the age of school. I think it's 143. It's something like that. Anyway,
it's 143. That's correct.
Yeah. So, but of course, this one being a refundable tax credit means for people who aren't earning enough income to be able to get the benefit of that, they would just get the money. So for them, it would still be like welfare. So a refundable tax credit works on half of it looks like welfare and half of it looks like a tax cut. So yeah, this isn't a pure tax cut. This isn't a pure libertarian utopia that you'd get from me if I had a different sort of hat on. But it's what could potentially work, right? So everyone would get that benefit. It gives it a benefit roughly then the average of what people get who send their kids to childcare currently, but it spreads it out so that everyone can use it and use it the way they see fit. So you can see here, I think it's a much more equitable divvying up of the money, and it means a family of 2 kids under school age aren't paying tax until they've hit $140,000 under this system, $143,000, which means we've got rid of a huge amount of that tax welfare churn, which both drives up the EMTRs, as we said before, and is just plain dumb anyway. So that's the big 3 parts. The 4th part I won't spend too much time on because it's basically just tying a bow in this. A lot of these benefits we talked about, especially the first and second one, are doing roughly the same thing that the family welfare benefit, called the family tax benefit, but that FTB. So
FTB
because it's doing the same thing,
it's welfare. So let's just
FTB is welfare. Yes.
Narrative.
So it's doing a very similar thing to what FTB is doing. So what it allows us to do is we can then shrink FTB. You'd think, well, why not say abolish FTB? Because remember, I'm trying to do this within the Overton window, and the other benefits we're talking about are benefits you get if you're a taxpayer. And of course, if you don't have a job, you're not paying any tax. So what benefit do they get? All right. So you keep paying the FTB to them. I would say you just rename it as a supplement to your welfare. So you got welfare, and then you'd have like a child supplement on top of welfare. And that's how FTB would continue. And then you phase that welfare out quicker because people on 100,000, 130,000 don't need the family welfare anymore because they've now got a family tax cut. So they're not churning the money in circle. They're actually independent. They're raising their kids. They're earning their money and looking after their family themselves, not caught in a system they don't need to get caught in, not suffering from these double whammy EMTRs. So we can, there'd still be some people on the family welfare program, but there'd be fewer people on that. More people could escape that and instead be getting the family tax cuts that we're proposing. So that's the 4-part plan. I've been talking a lot. I don't know if you want to filibuster for a second, Brian, and I'll find out if there's any good comments.
I guess my question is why has there always been such a? I mean, you and I have been around the halls of Parliament, and we've raised this with. Why am I angry? Because no one seems to want to touch this when it comes to policymakers in Parliament. And yes, it is all the taxes. When we walk the halls of Parliament and we talk to some people, there are some people that absolutely get this and they support this. Matt Canavan's been very good on income splitting, for instance. But there are other people that just don't want to touch it, and I don't know why. I don't know what the impetus is. I don't know where the hesitation comes from in their mind. Maybe they think that this is seen as like sort of too much of like a trad view of the world. It doesn't make sense to me. Maybe you've got some insights there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of the thing to realize is the current system is not neutral. We're not taking a neutral system and trying to force everybody to have a white picket fence and a stay-at-home wife in the kitchen baking a pie, like one of these cliche pictures. The current system, well, that might be what you want, but our tax system isn't about beating people over the head and forcing them to have that. It's about making the playing field more equal so that people are able to choose whichever they want, right? I mean, look, also, I think the decision you and I have made, I think, is the right one for you and me. And I think it's the right one for a lot of people, but it won't be for everyone. There's different people out there. We don't want to be unduly sort of taxing and stigmatizing the people who go a different way, at least not in this policy. We don't, Brian. You can do that in your private time. But that's not the situation we're in. We've got a situation that is currently biased in the opposite direction, right? So that it's not that they've sort of accidentally come to this situation and then they just they don't want to bias it our way. It's the bureaucrats have been proactively crafting a policy framework that is basically all around. And I think this is what it comes down to in large part, which I think is an insidious and a dumb goal, but they keep repeating it, so they must mean it. Labor force participation. Yeah, there is this belief that just whatever you can do to increase labor force participation is a good thing. And I'll go on another rant if you'll indulge me a bit longer. I guess this is tax policy, so you're kind of stuck with me a little bit. But there's this cliche, if you want to grow an economy, that there's 3 ways. There's the 3 Ps, they call it. So it's population, participation, and productivity. And as I like to say, like only one of those works. Right. So it's pretty obvious why population doesn't work. I mean, most people see that pretty quickly. It's if you've got more people, more people come in, grows the GDP, but the GDP has to be split between more people. So you haven't really got anywhere. It's like
2 people eating.
Yeah, you had 2 people eating 1 pizza. Now you've got 4 people eating 2 pizzas. I mean, everyone still gets 4 slices. You haven't changed anything for the well-being of people, right? So population doesn't really help. So that's why we sometimes look at GDP per capita as a much better metric. You don't just look at GDP, right? Because Nigeria has a bigger GDP than New Zealand. But the quality of life in New Zealand is much better than Nigeria, right? So let's be realistic about this. So GDP per person is much more sensible to look at. And as you would know, we've had nearly 2 years of declining GDP per person, like the so-called
no
per
one can
capita
predict
recession,
that.
which I believe the ATA was the first to come out and talk about almost 2 years ago. And no one really picked it up at the time. And about a year later, everyone started saying it. So you're welcome.
About a year later, you had KPMG going, "Oh my God, we've found that GDP per person's gone down." It's like, oh, geez.
Which is another reason why you should go to taxpayers.org.au and become a member today so we can keep doing this stuff. But even then, I mean, that is an improvement, and that's often enough to talk about. But even then, GDP per person, just the use of GDP hides something very important. So if you increase participation, you would increase GDP per person. And that's what the Treasury boffins know. And they go out, and it's true. You boost your participation rate, you can boost your GDP per person. But the problem with that measure is the goal of economics has never been to maximize money. I know it's a thing, it's an accusation often thrown at us, but it's never been true since day dot. It's a very technical, dry sounding term, but the goal of economics is utility maximization, which is just like a wank word for saying happiness maximization. I mean, the goal is to try to get people to be able to live their best life. And it is true that if you have more money, you are generally able to have a better life. More money is one part of what gives you a good life. Despite what the hippies may say, that is true. It is one part, but it's not the only part. And economists have never made that mistake. I mean, politicians make that mistake and then blame economists. But economists have always understood that another thing that goes into life, I mean, this is core at the very basis of the theory. Another thing that goes into life is what they call leisure. Now, it's not just leisure. It's time with your family. It's time with your friends. It's time volunteering. I mean, it can be a lot of things that aren't just sitting on a beach sipping a Mai Tai, but it's all of those things are unpaid, but they are useful. And in many cases, they are productive. Right? I mean, a lot of people do work in the house. It's not leisure. It's not sitting on a beach, but it's work. It's productive. It's important. It matters, but it's not in GDP. Now, if you could fix your own roof, your roof has a hole. If you could fix your own roof, that work is real work that gave you a real benefit, but it's not in GDP. But if you paid someone to come and fix your roof, no more or less work's been done. The exact same amount of work's been done. The roof has been fixed, but now it shows up in GDP. I'll give you an even more absurd example of this. Imagine there's 2 houses next door. They both have kids. And if someone in each of those houses is looking after their own kids, it's not in GDP. I mean, it's a real service. It's a value being done bringing up kids, but it's not in GDP.
A better service because you know these people better than some stranger at a childcare centre.
But consider this. Those 2 people next door, if they just sent their kids over to each other for 8 hours a day, right? So that same number of people are looking after kids. It's the same number of kids being looked after. They're just moving next door, and then they paid each other the same amount. I'll pay you $10 to do it. I'll pay you $10 to do it. GDP just went up $20. There's nothing new being added to the world. That is self-evident. And this isn't a new thing that we've just discovered recently. It's been known. This is one of the problems with GDP. GDP is a very useful measure. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it has a couple of asterisks. Whenever I used to teach this, back in my lecturing days, you go through all of these things that GDP can get wrong. You say, look, it's still useful, and one of the main things is it doesn't count the non-traded sector. Like the real work that is done but not traded in the official markets doesn't show up in GDP. So, and this is the mistake that these participation people do. They're desperately trying to increase the official GDP numbers, the official statistics, but they're not actually improving the world. They're funneling a lot of people into the workforce and funneling a lot of kids off into daycare centers. So you've got still a bunch of people looking after kids, but they're now not the parents of the kids looking after the kids. And so it all shows up in GDP. And it's a bit of a phantom. And you look at a lot of the discussion coming out of like the normie econ people, the government bureaucracy, and they will always talk, oh, this is increasing participation. Increasing, women's labor force participation is often the key thing. And they'll say it so proudly. Why is that the goal? I mean, it may be a good thing. Some women should work more. Some should work less. Up to each person.
I guess it's just like a metric that they've all agreed is somehow representative of something. And this is a bit of a tangent, but under the last government, during COVID, you had all these small businesses and family-run businesses that completely went under. And a personal friend of mine, he ran a cafe. He had to shut his business down. He, had 6 or 7 employees, had to fire them all. He'd mortgaged his house against his business. So when he had to shut his business down, he was potentially facing losing his house as well. So, he was up shit creek without a paddle. And then he went and got a job, I think it was at Bunnings, right? Just doing like shelf stacking in one of their warehouses. And then the next day I'm watching the television and Josh Frydenberg is saying, oh no, we've done a great job because, job numbers actually haven't decreased that much because we've been such great economic managers. It's like, well, no, sorry. If you enact legislation that shuts a business down, he fires all of his employees, he potentially, has to declare bankruptcy and lose his house. And then he moves across and gets a minimum wage job stacking shelves at Bunnings. Yes, on your job sheet, workplace participation hasn't shifted. But on every other metric, that guy is completely screwed. And they don't seem to measure for that. So I guess that's a long-winded way of me saying it seems like a similar kind of issue where they just want to focus on one metric, which is participation, or that GDP graph looks bigger, and therefore we good economic managers. And it's just...
Yeah, look, it's a bugbear of mine, of a lot of people. The problem here comes... It's a problem of measurement in sometimes. You find a measure that is a pretty good measure and that you're measuring something and that gives you good information. As soon as everyone starts focusing on the measurement, people start working out ways to game the measurement. Not fix the underlying problem, but just game the tool you're using to measure the underlying problem. And so it's a bit difficult because you do want to measure things, and a lot of these measurements can still be useful. The problem is when you start deifying them, you start thinking, oh, it's about the measurement that I'm looking at. No, there's an underlying world that you always have to remain cognizant of. And look, the thing you're talking about there, we should do another rant another time about just the labor market there, because one of my bugbears is the degree to which we've just funneled everyone into working for Mr. McGillicuddy's factory instead of the old rule where a lot more people just found it normal to, get out of school and think, oh, what business should I start now? That used to be a normal thing to think. That's just how humans existed. And now it's like, 1% of the population are entrepreneurs and the rest of us go and work in the factory and stamp boxes. It's or do live streams at 9 p.m. or whatever it is.
Marxist, it kind of just feels like a weird funneling into our own version of Marxism. Anyway, that's a separate topic.
Look, I think another part of that is some of the boffins is trying to push up labor force participation, but you notice they often focus on female labor force participation. And I think, again, we're going to have another boomer moment of, see, Darcy's joining us in our boomer moments, but I think we're about to have another one. There is this whole theme, dare I say meme, the idea that, men and women have to be doing everything exactly the same. So if men have, say, whatever it is, 80% labor force participation and women have 60% labor force participation, then there is an existential problem at the core of our society, and we will not be decent, good people until we fix that by making sure that these damn mums don't spend any time with their kids and go to the factory. And I think the people who are doing that think they're doing good, right? And they would accuse us of just being evil sexists. And I think that's part of the fear the Liberal Party has, is that they are so scared of being called sexist that a policy that allows women more choice, which is what we're suggesting a policy that would allow women and parents and families more choice, more options to be able to, they can still go to work if they want, but now it's a bit easier for them to be able to spend more time with their kids if they want. They would think that is anti-women, because letting women have choice is anti-women. Forcing them to go and work at a job they hate is pro-woman.
I guess these are the feedback loops that they get, and again, I'm talking anecdotally, so sure, it's not representative of the broader population. But in my street alone, there's multiple people that have now had kids, and they're all working professionals. And it's interesting having the conversations with them. Like, one of the mothers up from the street from us, she had her daughter, and she's going to take, I think it was 6 months, maternity leave, and then go back to work, and then 6 months rocked up, and she decided that actually maybe she was going to continue that out. 12 months has gone past, and she's decided, oh, actually, no, I kind of really like spending time with my daughter, and I don't really care about what the, I don't care about what KPIs do or don't get met within giant, mega, Globo Corpo that I work for. So I think I'm just going to make more babies. And I'm seeing that a lot. And again, this is anecdotal, but I know that with a lot of women who did work hard and they did all those things and they participated in the workforce and became working professionals. They then went and had kids and realized that actually that's what they want to do, and they don't want to go back because they don't care about how hard they work as a cog in a giant machine that doesn't really care about them. They want to raise their family and have a nice time and spend that time with their family, and they find that way more fulfilling. And somehow articulating that point has been sort of cast as this boomer right-wing anti-woman view, when the feedback loops I'm seeing is that the women are actually, they feel fucking liberated by it. And I get it, straight white male talking about what women feel, how dare I cancel me, hate speech. I understand, but I'm right.
Look, I've seen the same thing anecdotally, but even then, I'll just remind people, we're not talking about a policy that tries to force all the women back into the kitchen. Notwithstanding what Brian might want to do, this policy just gives people more choice. I mean, realistically, the current incentives they're so set up, the tax and welfare incentives are so set up that if you need more money, you have to send the second person out to work. You have to have two people working full-time. In this day and age, you have to have two people working full-time and overtime to be able to afford the current cost of living this government has given us and the previous government, quite frankly, and 2 years of recession. And we're trying to make it with a bit more of a balanced tax and welfare treatment, a little bit easier for families to be able to have kids and enjoy their family while still paying their bills. And you can still make all of the current choices. No one's taking any of those choices away. I'm not trying to increase a tax on people who have two-income families. We're trying to make it a bit easier for people, no matter how they structure their family, and especially if they structure their family to actually spend time with their family, to make sure they are not discriminated against, instead not had more disincentives piled on them, so that they can make those choices. But yeah, look, anecdote. So with that caveat aside, that we're not actually trying to force women to the kitchen, we're just trying to allow families to have choices. My anecdotal experience has been very similar to yours. I can't help but think of situations like you were saying. You have some of these female friends who went off, got the job, did the workforce participation, then had kids and pivoted. Some won't get to having kids in time, and and some will be very happy about that, and that's great. And I don't want to force them to have kids, and some people shouldn't be parents probably. But I can't help but feel like some of these people are being given a bum steer. The tax and welfare system is funneling them down one life path, and that life path is right for some, but it's not right for everyone. And
well, we feel like we're given a bum steer. We still got started and have started building a family, but we feel like we did it way later than we should have in hindsight. And part of that is because of all these incentives to effectively not have kids. I'm sure that's not the intended outcome, but the purpose of a system is what it does, right? So if the system delivers people having kids later and having fewer kids, then that's the purpose of the system, whether or not that was an intended purpose or not.
Yeah, well, I mean, go back 50 years, people were worried about there being far too many kids in the world. I mean, what I can't remember her name now, but one of the famous feminists that was trying to encourage more women to go and just act exactly the same as men. There was a pushback from the liberal feminists saying, I think it was before Germaine, but there was a pushback by liberal feminists, closer to what we would just call normal people nowadays, just treat women equally. But the old school liberal feminists saying, well, yes, we should give women the choice. They should have the option. They should be able to do this. And this original old school kind of Marxist feminist said, no, you can't give women a choice. If they have a free choice, they'll enjoy having kids too much. And that'll screw up my plans because I don't want them to discover that they enjoy being a mum.
Do this, right?
The idea, you get more women into the workforce, you decrease the fertility rate. That was known. That was part of the agenda at one stage. I don't think a nefarious one. They thought the world was overpopulated and we were all just going to start crawling around like
we were just going to breed ourselves into like this weird heat death of the universe,
something like that. But of course, as you know, and I don't know if we have enough time to dive into this, but I find the topic fascinating. As you know, we've got the exact opposite problem in the world today. I mean, Australia's fertility rate is 1.5. So put that in context, you need about 2 or 2.1 to replace the population. And we've been below replacement rate for about 40 or 50 years. But, up until recently, we were only just below replacement rate. So that's fine. That would have been manageable, being just below, a bit of immigration, and you can have a slight decline in population, and that's perfectly manageable. But we're not just below it anymore. We're down to 1.5. Italy's down to 1.1. Each generation will roughly halve. Korea is down to 0.8. And the fascinating stat out of Korea is you go forward, I think three or four generations in Korea. If you go forward about 100 years in generations, their population of South Korea will go from 40 million, which it currently is, down to about 2 million. That's mind-boggling. I mean, something has to give. It's hard to believe that will happen. But we've never been in this situation before.
Politicians always go for the easy answer, which is, I'll just import infinity strangers. And sure, we can have migration, whatever, but they make, and this goes back to what you were saying before, they make the mistake, which is if you just import infinity strangers, productivity goes up because there's more people, which means GDP, which means problem solved. But as you mentioned, what matters is GDP per person. So that's why, despite the fact that, here in Australia, I think we had 1.2 million migrants last year alone, and GDP is not increasing. It's per person going backwards.
And as I said before, it should really be well-being per person, not GDP. Yes. And that way we get out of this problem of people going, force more participation. Everyone works 12-hour days, 7-day week. You'll increase GDP per capita. Yes, you technically would, but that's not the goal of life, right? So,
I guess well-being. I guess that underlies.
One second on that, because I think it's an important one to just quickly say for anyone who listened to that part. Now, I agree with you that the current migration attitudes is retarded. But even on a technical level, even if you are 100% pro open borders, it just doesn't work for two reasons. Yes. One is migrants also age. And then when the migrants come here, their fertility also drops. So the migration pushes the problem back 10 years, but it doesn't solve the problem.
That's fine. You just import another bajillion strangers. I'm putting on my retarded politician hat right now. And that just seems to be the only solution that they keep throwing at this. And or take money from other people and then just have more handouts. And it's frustrating to me, and I think it underlines why this policy to me is extremely important, because there is a better way to tackle this issue. There is a better way to tackle the fact that we are under replacement rates. There is a better way to tackle.
You're being too kind, Brian. You're being too kind, because it's not like this is a better way than immigration. The immigration solution literally doesn't work, and no one who studies this, the intergenerational report put out by Treasury. I was at Treasury at the time when they were writing the first one, and one of the first things they did when they ran all the numbers, immigration doesn't really help. And these aren't people who were trying to find that. They were probably trying to find the opposite if they had an instinct. But it literally just doesn't solve the problem. So that it's a non-starter. You could want all the immigrants in the world, none of the immigrants in the world. We can have that debate another time. And the relevant thing is something else. It doesn't actually fix this problem. So we could probably do that debate another time as well, the population one, but it's not going to work for us here. And then the issue of the shrinking population, that decreasing fertility rate, it's not just a shrinking population, because, that's fine. You can have fewer people. We used to have fewer people in Australia, and Australia used to be fine. That's not the issue. The issue is, or one of the issues are, it also goes with an aging population, because you're having fewer kids, but you still have plenty of old people. So we used to have about 6 working age people for each retired person. That's retired people that really use a lot of welfare, right? Because they take the pension, which is more than the dole, and they get a lot of healthcare. A lot of healthcare is spent on the aged. So health and aged care for the aged, a big expense in the budget. We used to have 6 working age people paying tax for each one of those retirement aged people. Now we're down to, about, I think, 3.5. I'm going off memory. I should have checked these stats before I came. And projecting forward another 40 years, it's going down to about 2.5. And of the take out the people who don't pay tax or don't pay net tax, fewer than 2 people. So that's fewer than 2. We used to have 6. We're going to have fewer than 2. And it's not like it stops there. This just keeps getting worse. So this problem is somewhat existential. The issue of the declining fertility rate, and therefore the aging population, and then eventually the shrinking population. The welfare state as currently exists will not exist. It cannot. It just literally will not be able to be there in any countries that go down this path, and all countries are going down this path. And I just remembered the other thing I wanted to say about migration as a solution. Migration from where? Latin America? Well, that's what Americans would often think, Latin America. They've got lower fertility rates than the USA does. So that's not a solution. Their populations are all about to shrink. We get it from East Europe. They're below replacement rate. They're not having kids. Their fertility rate's below 2 as well. East Asia, the lowest in the world. Their fertility rate is about half replacement rate. So we're not getting it from there.
Yeah,
South Asia, India has just gone below 2. India's gone below 2, and the Muslim world is just about to go below 2. So
yeah, so you
where
know,
are we getting
this is again, right? Like you put on the politician retard hat, and they go, yes, but we have magic soil in the West, and then when they get here, they'll just completely change everything that they do, and they'll just start making babies, even though all the data says that they won't do that, and all the data says that actually you're just going to have to import more in another 10 years' time. My suspicion my suspicion is that there is not a single leader within mainstream parties that wants to be the person that goes, yeah, actually, we need a complete direction change here, and it's going to hurt temporarily. So it's like, just keep those key numbers: job participation, GDP, ignore per capita, GDP, and population levels. Just keep it increasing, or at least not decreasing, so that we can continue running on fumes. And that's what it feels like here. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I think you're wrong. Let me push back a little bit. I think it's just as stupid long term. No, I think the motivation for mainstream politicians not wanting to address the migrant intake is that the migrant intake is massively students at our universities. And our universities can only exist because they are massively cross-subsidized by in excess of 100,000 people coming in each year, in excess net, coming in each year to go to our universities. And a lot of those people are coming to our universities to do a fake degree so they can stay around long enough to get PR and citizenship. So that's their motivation. But when they're here, they pay a metric shit ton of money into the university system. And that's the only way the university system can afford to be charging relatively less for Australians. Now, I know Australians always complain, I have to pay HECS, I have to pay HECS. Your HECS debt is less than half, or much less than half of the actual cost of giving you the education. So if you weren't being massively cross-subsidized by foreign students, university prices would double. I don't know exactly what they'd do. Double, triple, go up by a lot. Let's just say that much. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because too many people go to uni. They go there for far too long. They study a bunch of bullshit that they don't need, and it's probably dragging us all backwards. But I think that's the sentence politicians are scared to say, because I don't think they want to admit, oh, yes, let's just double the price of university and have fewer people go there. I think that's the sentence they're scared of, and they're so scared of that sentence, they'll say, oh, well, let's just take the migrants because that'll cross-subsidize our university system. So just as bad a conclusion as yours, but I think
that is just basically like, I hear all this stuff and it kills me. It's fucking infuriating. And I don't know. I dropped out of high school. I didn't even go to university. So from my viewpoint, I just burn them down. Start again. We don't need universities. We'll figure it out. Put everyone in the Bunnings shed, right? You want to learn STEM? That's fine. You can learn a real degree. We'll put you in a Bunnings shed. Here's the reading material. Figure it out. Go build shit. All your other degrees, they don't exist. Sorry, you want to do gender studies? Nah, go work in the mines. I'm done. But
no, I don't disagree. Of course, I went the other way. I spent far too long at university and came out one of those fancy PhD things. And then I always tell people, don't trust people with PhDs. Or at least don't trust people who are proud of them. So that's a different part. But I mean, I take a sort of a quirky take on this that I don't think is going to be replicated by the major parties. I said before, our tax policy is trying to stay inside the Overton window. And I think for the most part, their policy in and of itself has. Perhaps our commentary afterwards, in the last 10 or 15 minutes, is straight outside the Overton window. But our policy, for the people who are skeptical of how this is turned into boomer bait, go and read the actual policy. I think it is still pretty fair, pretty reasonable, pretty achievable. But that notwithstanding, one of the things I think would be the benefit from restricting migration. I know a lot of people have a lot of reasons to want to restrict migration. I think one of the benefits is it would blow up our university system. So the very reason the government doesn't want to do it, I see it as a plus. I mean, I actually think the academic, bureaucratic, media elite, I always bundle them together very intentionally. I think they are screwing our country. I think they've taken us down a dark path. And I think they're such an established elite that they need to be burnt out somehow. And without doing something like what Elon Musk is doing in America to the bureaucrats I don't see how we change direction fundamentally without gutting those institutions. So I don't want this academic, bureaucratic, media elite to be able to stay in their cushy jobs. So the collapse of universities, I mean, it'll take away the possibility of me getting back into academia, I guess.
So our family tax policy has led to, and then collapse universities, which is
again, that's not our policy. Actually,
aside, I think broadly, yes, you're right in terms of the entire bureaucratic apparatus needs to be razed to the ground and restarted. But I will try and bring it back into the Overton window, which is the point of this policy is to try and encourage building families. And deactivist Randy, he says he's plenty fertile, so maybe he'll get all kinds of massive tax cuts, which is, good for him. You should back our policy. Make some videos for us. Look at this setup I've got. I've got a curtain as my background. No, and we need like a nice studio, mate. So just help us.
We should bring him on.
No,
seriously, we should bring him on, because as daft as we sound, if we brought him on to sound daft, we'd look smarter by comparison, and the whole show would get better. So no, Randy, come and join us on the stage sometime. I'm sure after that wonderful introduction, you won't. So just going back to the policy, though, I just I like talking about this stuff. I like talking about the fertility decline, the problems of that, the consequences of that.
I reckon we should do that as our next episode. Honestly, like a real deep dive into fertility decline.
Yeah, it's actually more difficult than you'd imagine, because most of the things people have tried to do to fix it aren't working as well. But anyway, let's put that aside for now. But try to bring it back to the core of what we're saying here. So, to the degree that some of this conversation has spooked some of the horses, I just want to remind people the core of this is we've got a bunch of families who are paying a metric shit ton of tax into the system and then taking it back out in welfare payments. And the nature of these tax and welfare payments are such that they are artificially incentivizing more and more people to structure their families in such a way where kids are expensive, but they get no value because they can't spend any time with them. We're trying to find a way here where you can take more families out of this tax welfare churn, this pointless tax welfare churn that is both pointless, I mean, I guess, except for the bureaucrats who get to pass the money to each other, but it also drives up people's EMTRs, right, effective marginal tax rates. And so the core of this for us, try to give families, if you are married parents, want to be able to file your taxes jointly, and instead of having a $20,000 tax-free threshold, which is roughly what you've got now, jointly you have a $50,000 tax-free threshold plus an extra 10 for each kid. So $70,000 tax-free threshold if you've got 2 kids, and that would just help take a huge chunk of taxpayers out of the tax system. And these are people who are paying tax and receiving welfare anyway, so they don't need to be in the tax system. Right? So take them out of the tax system, and that make them a little bit more independent. It makes it a little bit easier to be able to raise your kids, and it gets rid of those absurdities we've talked about before. And it just makes the system more fair, right? It's more equal treatment between different family types. Like currently the tax system is very biased towards people whose both parents work exactly the same amount to earn exactly the same amount of money. It's biased towards those people. And we want a system that is just unbiased towards different family situations. If you want to keep both of you working 60-hour weeks, that's fine. I'm not trying to increase your tax. None of this policy is. You can make that choice. Let's make it so that people can make all of the choices and make them freely and be able to make those choices and still bring up a family without getting taxed to the bejesus. So that's the summary of the point we're pitching here. That's the policy for today, the ATA's family tax cut policy. We're going to have a whole series of tax cut policies coming out over the coming weeks in the lead up to the election. And we're doing it because I know we've reached the hour, but there's one last sort of trigger for a topic for you. We're doing this because, well, firstly, it's what we do, right? So we do this anyway, but it's not being done anywhere else. And most specifically, it's not being done by the people who are actually running for Parliament, who are running to be the government. I mean, to their credit, there are some minor parties who have put out a policy very similar to what we talked about today. Both the One Nation Party and the Libertarians have put out a policy about family income splitting, which is effectively very similar to the idea of having a joint $50,000 tax-free threshold. So, credit to some of those minor parties who are doing the work. But, God love them, they're not going to form government. Either Liberal or Labor is going to form government. And you tell me if you've seen it, Brian, but has there even been a hint of the government talking about anything to do with tax? And the Liberals have talked about a few little things no one cares about. Why is this such a non-issue for the people who are going to form our government?
It's frustrating, and I don't know why. there seems to be, from my perspective, within the coalition, within their campaign teams, and within a lot of their current membership, this complacency that they feel like they're going to win the election based off the sort of vibe shift that's happened across the West post Trump and arguably leading into Trump. So they don't want to touch anything. It's just there's no real point of difference that I can see on a raft of things. Sure, there's no denying in my mind that Peter Dutton's would be a better prime minister than Anthony Albanese, but that's assuming we've only got that's just between the two choices. I can't see anything there, and there seems to be no appetite. And I suspect that is because they feel that they will just potentially win government. They don't need to take risks, and therefore, why touch policies that could potentially be seen to be, boomer policies that are anti-women or whatever will be attacked. Whatever woke bullshit we thrown at it by left-wing parties. But the problem with that mindset is maybe they're right. Maybe they will form government. Maybe they'll get in. But if you run a campaign that has no agenda and you get elected on not having an agenda, you then have no mandate to actually affect change in this country. And what people don't understand, and for some reason people in the fucking coalition don't understand this, is if you don't have a mandate, the factions within the party that do not like you and do not want you as a leader will hold you to the fact that you do not have a mandate, right? So if you get elected based on nothing and then go, okay, I'm now going to pull the mask off and I'm this super-based conservative leader that's going to make Australia better, all of those moderate factions will go, no, that's not what you were elected on. And if you do that, we'll roll you. Whereas if you actually fucking, draw a line in the sand during the election campaign and you get elected on it, you've been elected by the Australian people to deliver these outcomes. You have the mandate. You can deliver it. So take a fucking stand. But
yeah, no, I agree. They're going to be short of a mandate without this. And the other thing is that it's going to take a while to explain and sell policies to people. So you have to start early, and even starting now would be too late, but at least now would be better than never. But there's a total lack of willingness to try and sell big ideas. We didn't used to have that. It wasn't that long ago. I know now we're even doing that back when I was a kid. But back when I was a kid, Howard used to run around in Houston before him, actually spending time talking to journalists trying to explain GST. Now, in hindsight, I think that was a bad tax reform. But put aside whether it was good or bad, they were attempting to do something. In the 80s, Hawke and Keating did the same thing. They took big ideas and they spent time trying to explain it to people. Now, some of the we're going to put forward a series of ideas
around the things that they wanted to introduce to try and change the country, for better or for worse. And now no one seems to want to do that. Sorry, I'll let you keep going.
The other thing about this is that, sorry, that split-second delay, so we never know when we're talking over each other. But the other thing about this is some of the ideas we're going to be suggesting here will be very popular. I reckon this could be sold well enough. I mean, we're not going radical here. One of the complaints against income splitting is that the benefit is bigger for higher income people. And that is true. If you had complete income splitting, or if you had complete merging of all tax brackets, that's actually true. Now, there's potentially an argument for that. I mean, if you're earning more money when you work, perhaps you need to have the bigger incentive to get you to go and earn the money. But put that aside, I frame this in such a way that that isn't true. Right? This is a merging of the tax-free threshold, leaving the other thresholds the same. So the benefit we're giving people isn't bigger for richer people. So this, I think, could be sellable. A coalition government with some guts and sort of a far-reaching agenda. If you went and told them we're going to cut taxes on families, I mean, Howard got re-elected saying roughly that sentence, although what he ended up saying is he's going to increase welfare for families. But I mean, to be fair, Howard's original pitch before he got in was to cut tax for families. And then once he got in, the bureaucrats convinced him that what he should do instead is increase welfare for families. But he spoke about it very eloquently back in the 90s. So it has been done before by the Liberal Party. I think these ideas, at least some of these ideas, are moderate enough. They can just pick and choose and pick the easiest one if you like. But I don't think there's a vote losers. Yeah, Dutton thinks he's ahead. Look, it's pretty close. I think he's ahead too, but it's pretty close. But adding another popular policy could be a way to go.
Here, right? Like the guys in CHQ will be making calculations, which is...
So CHQ, you'll have to say that for the people at home.
Sorry, campaign headquarters for the coalition, right? Like that. if they saw something like this land across their desk and it was like, look, should we wrap this up as a policy to roll out during the election? They'll sit there and they'll go, okay, what are the risks to us in the campaign? And my view is that they put way too much weighting on the screaming of the current industrial complex, right? Which is like people that weren't going to vote for them anyway, who read sort of what Peter Fitzsimons says in the Sydney Morning Herald and then, listen to Jane Caro. So they're not your voter base. Sure, they come to your dinner parties because they're well off and they live in Mossman and they like, having a nice waterfront property, but they're not Liberal voters. They're Teal voters and they're Karens. So they're not the people that you need to worry about at all. But for some reason, there's still this establishment mindset where they go, well, I went to a dinner party with Jane Caro and she said it was a bad policy because, she's a fucking communist. And I don't want to upset Jane Caro because the next time I go to a dinner party with her, she'll give me what for. And then they just walk it back. Whereas I genuinely, I cannot see how anyone across the political spectrum of the votes that you are actually likely to get and votes you are actually likely to pick up if you adopt this would be opposed to this policy, which is, do you want to have kids? Yes. Cool. We'll give you more money. Or rather, we'll let you keep more of your own money.
Well, here you go. For the people in CHQ who are looking at this and think that some of our suggestions have gone too far, how about just take number 2? Just take a $10,000 increase in your tax-free threshold per child. Right. So, I mean, we're putting a series of ideas out there so that politicians can pick a la carte. We're going to have a bunch more ideas going forward over the coming weeks. And a bunch of them, I think, are going to be vote winners. I mean, yes, some of them will decrease revenue, but they're the Liberal government. I mean, we're taxed too much. They say we're taxed too much. They say they're going to bring our tax down. So they shouldn't complain that some of the ideas cut tax. That's what tax cuts do. That's a good thing. That's a feature, not a bug. So anyway,
it'll throw the budget out of balance. It's like, okay, so find all of the other areas where you completely just take people's money and throw it against the wall, and just reduce those slightly so that you can give a tax cut to people who have kids.
Yeah, or introduce the tax cut slowly. I mean, there's ways to get around this, right? I mean, so some of our policy ideas you're going to hear over the coming weeks. I think the complaint will be they're too moderate, they're too careful, but I'm trying to frame some of them in such a way as that a politician might be willing to go for it. You can introduce some of these policies slowly over time so that there's just a small impact. To give you a context, the income tax is going up $17 billion between the current financial year and next financial year. And then the year after, it's going up by another $20 billion. So unless the argument is we're just supposed to have income tax going up by $20 billion each year, if that's the argument, it's a very green left argument. If that's not the argument, then we're supposed to get a tax cut. That is a massive amount of bracket creep. We're going to do a bit on bracket creep going forward as well. But that's a secret tax increase we get each year. And that means the government, if they're not trying to grow the size of government, which I don't think Dutton is trying to do intentionally, then it's appropriate to talk about tax reform that decreases tax revenue. It shouldn't spook them that much. So anyway, we're maybe getting too black-pilled on this. I mean, it could be that there are some Liberal boffins watching along to this. They're taking the ideas
next week, and Peter Dutton will be out there saying $10,000 in increase in the tax-free threshold for every single child. At which point, great, everyone should vote for Peter Dutton.
We'll have to take it all back. I'll tell you what, if you are a Liberal person listening along to this, you like the ideas, but you find us annoying, the best way to get your revenge on us is to convince the Liberal Party to steal our ideas, and then we will come back on here and eat crow. We'll say how wrong we were and that we suck, and then we'll cry. We'll cry live on
Maybe
air.
That's what I should do. I should send the policy to the politicians I don't get along with, the ones that find me frustrating, and say, look, you've got an opportunity here. You can steal this great idea and claim it as your own and make me look like a fucking idiot. That's how we'll do it. That's how we'll sell it to them. Go, great. We'll make the ATA look stupid.
So there's been nothing on tax. The only policy debate that I've seen, and people keep talking about it in political terms. We talked about it, the politics of it on Monday as well, was that the health policy, I don't know, you can't call it a debate, quote unquote debate, the bidding war on health spending. And look, Thursday nights are supposed to be able to put our teeth into real policy. I don't know if there's a real policy there to put our teeth into. But it just seems like that Labor made the judgment, a political judgment, that they could sort of wedge the Liberals on this and run a Medicare campaign by saying the word health a lot of times. So this is a truism of politics. If the word health is repeated a lot in the media, the Labor vote goes up. If the words economy or defense is repeated a lot in the media, the Liberal vote goes up. Now, it doesn't matter if that's fair or not. It just seems to be what happens. And the Labor strategy seemed to be to try to make everyone say the word health a lot in the campaign. And Dutton just came out and said, well, you can't do that because no matter how bad your policy is, no matter how bad, we'll copy it.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have much we were able to sink our teeth into. Now, I did say that we'd try to open it up for people to ask questions and trip us up, which I'm open to the idea as a concept, but I was also hoping these sessions wouldn't go too much over an hour. So we're at an hour 15. So I think we'll, as fun it is to chat, maybe we'll wrap it up. Brian, did you have any closing thoughts? Let's go back. Let's skip the health stuff. The government's given us nothing to talk about there. The only policy idea of substance in this campaign at the moment is about the ATA's family tax cuts policy. So do you want to wrap that one up for us?
Yeah, look, I think for those of you watching at home, and I've been asking a lot of our subscribers and our email subscribers as well to do it, is that politicians do respond to feedback loops. If your local MP if you've got a local Liberal MP or Nationals MP and they're in a relatively marginal seat, you should reach out to them and say, this is actually really important. I think that you should run with it. And you'd be surprised how often they pick up on that. I remember being told by a politician once that, they might get 50,000 emails on an issue and that might pique their interest because obviously there's a bunch of people out there that are emailing them. But what really piques their interest is when someone rocks up at their office and says, hey, there's this issue and I want you to take action on it. Because from his perspective, if someone's willing to, take time out of their day and go talk to a random politician they've never met before and say, I've got this concern and I want you to look at it, it means that concern is valid and that there's weight to it. So I know it sounds stupid. I know, again, leaning into the boomer stereotype here, but get on outside and go and have a chat because it works. I promise you it works. And yeah, this policy is really important to me. I know it's important to John, and I think it's really important for the country. So get out there, do something.
Touch grass, as the kids would say.
That's it.
If you've enjoyed this, or even if you hadn't, but you're sticking around and you want to throw some money at us, taxpayers.org.au, and on there you can donate one off if you like. But what I'd love people to do is become members if they can. We are going to have a little private spaces and unpacking some of the more complicated or nuanced elements of tax policy for members over time. You'll get early information about what we're doing, but more to the point, realistically, what you're doing is helping sure we can keep the doors open and keep doing what we're doing. So if you've enjoyed this or if you've tolerated this, please go to taxpayers.org.au and consider becoming a member. The lowest level of membership, the simple one, is just a couple of bucks a month. And that would be grand if we could get more people in there. And, last comment here to this cheeky youngster. Yeah, I could keep going. I enjoy these. What I'm thinking is, of course, these are then uploaded to X and YouTube and Facebook later. And to maximize the chance that people will watch it going forward, I wanted to keep them to a manageable time. So I'm kind of torn between, I'd like to just sit here and keep ranting, but I want people to actually click play on this video going into the future. So that's one of the reasons I'll eventually shut myself up. So, well, there you go. I'll have to show that one. Thank you, Nicola. We should get you on here sometime as well. Come and share your wisdom and tell us why the boys are wrong.
That's it. Jump on Monday. Tell us why we're all wrong.
We are going to start bringing guests on as we go forward. I mean, this was the first week we've been doing these. Every Monday at 8:30 is the ATA's politics live stream, and every Thursday at 8:30 is the ATA's policy live stream. So slightly different focus, but in the lead up to the election, there'll be plenty to talk about on both fronts. I hope you can join us on those. We're going to be putting out new tax papers, tax documents, ATA tax proposals every week between now and then. Next week, I'll be. I think. Well, no, we can discuss which one we're going to be doing next week. We've got a few lined up, but I was going to be pitching
Liberty
for.
Tyrant wants to be a guest.
Say that again. Oh, wow, that could be dangerous.
Well, I mean, he's a tyrant. That's
well. I tell you what, Liberty Tyrant, are you a member? Because I mean, that could help influence us. So
yeah, that's right. That's right. There's no such thing as a free podcast.
Was it Tans Taffel? But Tans Taffel. That could work. Anyway, you've been listening to John Humphreys and Brian Marlow from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. We'll be doing these each Monday and Thursday. Hope you can join us at the next one. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, let's go and cut some taxes.